I grew up in the 90s as the youngest of three brothers. My parents, being older and a little more old-fashioned than most, homeschooled me from kindergarten through the 8th grade. So my reading lessons began from a young age, probably around 3 years old. Aside from one hazy memory of my mom teaching me the alphabet song, I can't remember a time when I couldn't read. Like most younger siblings, I wanted nothing more than to be like my older brothers, who were roughly 10 years my senior. As a kid, I often picked up books lying around the house that were well beyond my reading level and acted as though I could understand them to try and impress my family. My parents were also very sensitive about how much time I spent in front of a screen growing up, so books offered a good way to entertain myself when watching TV or playing computer games was off limits. One of the weekly rituals back in those days was the Monday afternoon trip to the library, where my brothers and I would spend hours wandering through the aisles and where every week we were allowed to check out 4 or 5 books each. I was an obsessive kid and sometimes checked out books I enjoyed multiple times, and I especially enjoyed books on tape because they reminded me of story time and let me focus on the narrative rather than the mechanics of reading. My family were early adopters of the internet, and in the early 2000s, I spent a lot of time on message boards, usually ones centered around video games like The Legend of Zelda. Looking back, I credit my time spent on those message boards with really cementing my literacy and typing abilities. It dawned on me then how many opportunities being a proficient reader provided, how literacy could expand your world beyond the 4 walls of your house and connect you to new ideas, people, and places. During high school, I was an average student. I took merit-level English classes and got passable grades, but never applied myself very much, largely because few of the books we were required to read sparked any interest. It wasn't that I ever thought of myself as a bad reader, just a bored one. I did, however, begin to read for pleasure more and more towards the end of high school. The main passion in my life during my teen years was always music. My social environment in high school revolved around sharing music, playing in bands, and going to concerts. And at a time in life where I was seeking an identity of my own, music offered a way to express and define myself. I started teaching myself to play the bass guitar, and spent my free time playing in bands whose enthusiasm usually outpaced our musical talent. Learning to read music was like learning a new language, and being able to do so unlocked new worlds for me, as I fell in love with listening to and playing genres like jazz, classical, and salsa. For the first time, I felt plugged into something larger than myself. It wasn't until my early 20s that I fell head over heels in love with reading. One winter, I sat by the fireplace reading the Lord of the Rings series and realized, for the first time, how much depth and detail books could contain, how an author could stretch out on the written page, create whole worlds, and develop ideas in a way not possible through other mediums. My interests drifted into history and philosophy, including a year-long stint reading everything about Zen Buddhism that I could get my hands on. I read The Stranger by Albert Camus and couldn't stop thinking about it for weeks. I gave myself migraines trying to wrap my brain around the existentialism of Jean-Paul Sartre. I spent weeks obsessing over Tom Wolfe's psychedelic classic, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. I read Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces and felt like I was being given a glimpse into the world's great mysteries. It was while reading and engaging with these more complex books that I began to consider going back to school. I hadn't pursued academics very much when I'd had the opportunity, and that had been something I had come to regret as I grew older. I thought back on how literacy and learning had opened so many doors for me over the course of my life, and realized that there were still plenty more doors to be opened. Finally, at age 28, I resumed my academic career and recommitted myself to learning. After a lot of hard work, I'm a student at a college I had always idly dreamed of attending, but never seriously thought I would.